Good afternoon, everyone. If you can take your seats so we begin our meeting for Monday, June 27, 2016. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Confirmation of agenda. Okay. Is anybody listening? Thank you. Confirmation of minute for May 30 and June 20th, that the Ottawa Police Service Board confirmed the minute of the 30th May and June 20, 2016. Is the minute carried? Declaration of interest? Inquiries? No? We do have a little note here from our chief. The chief could not be here this evening. He's in Niagara Falls for the Ontario Association of Chief of Police Conference. He's been sworn in as the president of important roles in policing, and I wanted to congratulate the chief. Earlier, he was selected as the president of Ontario Chief of Police. So he will be back in tomorrow for the North American Leaders Summit. So just for our record. Item number 1 is amendment to Procedures Bylaw number 3 of 2014, and this is to have our board meeting start July by 4 p.m. instead of 5. It's on the item. Carrie? Thank you. Item number 1, the Chief's verbal report, will hold item number 1. Item number 2 is the board committee review, will hold item number 2. And my colleague, Carl Nicholson, will introduce this item because he has to leave at 5:30, I believe. So we'll go through item number 1 first, item 2, and then we can start with this item, and then we'll go through consent agenda after Mr. Chair, if he's... Okay, so item number 3, implementation of the Ontario Regulation 58/16, collection of identifying information in certain circumstances, and we have a presentation from our staff on this one. Item number 4 is board policy CR18, collection of identifying information in certain circumstances, interpretation, and duties. So that the Ottawa Police Service Board approved the collection of identifying information in certain circumstances policy attached as document 1. Is on the item? Okay, thank you. Item number 5, Ottawa Police Service Annual Report 2015. The Ottawa Police Service Board received this report, an online version for information. It's received. Thank you. Item number 6, complying with the Ministry Standard 2015 Annual Report. The Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Thank you. Item number 7, outstanding board inquiries in motion, June 2016. That the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Item number 8, letters of commendation, letters that the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Thank you. And we do have other communication from the Ontario Association of Police Service Board, OAPSB, and proposed change to the Highway Traffic Act also as a correspondent. Is the correspondent received? Thank you. So we'll go to item number 2, and the chair of the Governing Policy Committee will introduce this item. Member Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I have the pleasure of introducing this item to the board. At the meeting of the board on April 25th, the board approved a motion asking the Policy and Governance Committee to conduct a review of the committee procedures and practices in other large boards in the country and to report back to the board, and that we make recommendations to the board with regard to the committee structure and mandate, and to ensure that they meet the board's expectations of transparency and accountability and contribute to an efficient and effective decision-making process. And to that end, the Policy and Governance Committee met. We reviewed what the other boards are doing, large boards in the country. We did a major survey. We also looked at a survey which had been done by the Canadian Association of Police Governance. We reviewed pertinent legislation, the Police Services Act, the MFIPA. We looked at all of the legal implications. We looked at things like the definition of a meeting before we came to this recommendation that we are presenting to the board today. We think meetings of the Police Services Board have always been advertised and held in public, with all of the agenda and minutes publicly available, and members of the public have always been welcome to attend and speak at board meetings on matters within the jurisdiction of the board. Currently, our board has 4 committees, each comprised of 3 members that meet as required. They have no decision-making authority. And the board has been following common practices amongst Police Services Board with regard to the holding of these meetings. As a result of questions recently received, we've undertook this review of our procedures, and we think it's important as a committee that the public sees that civilian governance is happening. So in the interest of openness and transparency, these are the recommendations that we are making to the board today. And, I turn it over for further discussion if needed.
Okay, so thank you, Member Nicholson. We have a question, but so the committee right now will be follow the Police Service Board policy procedure. So basically, the meeting will be advertised concurrent with, like, we advertise the police board meeting on the web on the city website, and those meetings will be open to the public and the media.
Correct. We're suggesting that the date, time, location of the committee meeting be advertised on the website, that the items that are publicly listed, that a list of topics exempt from being discussed in those committee meetings publicly.
Can you put your mic on?
Sorry. We made publicly available to provide transparency as to what can be discussed in closed sessions versus public. That committee chairs, on a routine basis, provide an update on committee meetings at regular board meetings, and that minutes of committee meetings be included on the board's agendas, public or confidential, depending on the subject matter, and that the content of the minutes of these committees consists of the essence of the subject, the outcome, and a summary of the rationale for the outcomes. So that is our recommendation to the board today.
So we do have member of the public to speak, but we'll go to our board member first for a question, because I know I have to keep an eye on the time for you. Okay, Member Harder.
Yeah, thank you. And so on this committee that discussed this, there were the 2 of you there?
Yes.
Okay. So did you discuss just not having committee meetings anymore? Because really, if you think about it, these are working sessions. They're not committee meetings. I mean, a working session is what you call something that has no voting capacity, etc. Normally, we wouldn't even have you introducing this, to tell you the truth, because it's just a working group. So did you consider just abandoning working groups?
We did not consider that.
Well, I'm going to suggest that that's what we do, and we have all the work come here. I think otherwise what we're doing is setting up a system which we rarely have public come to speak to our Police Services Board, and so maybe we would get more people coming out to the Police Services Board where there's more people, the media is there, etc., and there's more engagement in the process, a lot less work for staff, and we just forego that and just have before us that maybe we'd have to have more presentations, I would suggest. But certainly this presentation could be limited, as they should be, to 5 minutes, and maybe we'd have more people. I don't think that we're going to get more people out, and I don't think we're going to get more media, and I think that it's something that should have been considered at the time of the decision-making, but just to cancel the committees.
Are you moving a motion on this? Because right now we have what we have in front of us.
Maybe the person, do you want to have the person up to speak first?
Okay, we have Member Smallwood.
I don't, I just was asking the question because I didn't know if they, because I haven't seen anything until this report came live. I have not been talked to about it, et cetera. So when I received that and I only had an opportunity to review my agenda on the weekend, I'm planning tomorrow. I've got a lot of priorities. So I read the whole thing and I thought, how did we get to here so quickly, and why did we? It doesn't seem like there's a compelling reason why you have to, other than the fact that there was some noise in the media. So I'm saying is, if that is something that we are concerned about, we always have the media here. They come out for us for sure. Why not just have any discussion here? Thank you. And I'll listen to what others say. If no one's interested in doing that, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Member Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. We did actually, one of the questions I asked of staff was whether or not they thought the working committees was helpful to them, and they felt that it was, because the discussions can be quite lengthy at times, and I think it would be very difficult in a public board meeting to have the kind of fulsome discussion. It certainly couldn't be restricted to 5 minutes. We often have meetings that go on for an hour or more. Right, but even the staff presentations tend to be very much back and forth, and so we do have very fulsome discussions, and I think it gives an opportunity for us to get a much better understanding of the issue, and I think it would be very difficult to have that kind of really important dialogue with our people who are advising us in a public meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Okay. So let's continue with the discussion.
I agree that it could be called a working group, definitely, because I think that's what we are doing. We're gathering information during those committee meetings. But I also think that because of the length of time that they take and the discussion that we have, we don't want to be rushed through it. I think it's important that we separate them from the board meetings and have an opportunity to speak with staff.
Okay. Thank you, Member Velikat. I, for one, we reach out to the province and we ask our colleague in the Big 12 how they handle those situations. And there was a various group that were different. Now, we all understand 3 board members do not make decisions. That's just a working group or a committee who have mechanical questions to the staff and work with the staff and try to go a little bit more detail, because we come to the board meeting and it seems like we have other things to do than go at the mechanical of the stuff. It's still Section 35 of the Police Service Act give the chair of the committee the flexibility. If they feel this item need to be in camera, at the call of the chair, we can move in camera, just like we do in the board, and discuss those items in camera. But that's an option. It's always available under Section 35. But we in the area where everyone is going for, and the ministry more and more asking for more transparency and accountability, I think this is a good step. And I, for one, as the president of the Ontario Association of Police Board, I sent a letter encouraging all the boards in the province to be open with their meeting, and we'll move forward with this. But that's your Member Turner, you have a question, or you're okay?
Well, Mr. Chair, first of all, I apologize. I wasn't able to attend that meeting. I think that would have been important, a great discussion to have. We toyed with the idea of starting a little bit earlier, and I think that has a lot of merit, because we do want to have wholesome discussions. At the same time, I think we all receive the distributions of presentations, and sometimes they're quite lengthy, 30, 40 slides long. If we can learn to work with those presentations to make them shorter, after speaking with Councillor Harder, I'm starting to think the same way, that as chair of the library board, I have ad hoc groups to get some of this extra work done, but everything gets done at the table. And I know the police board's a bit of a different monster. They've got different rules. Same with Ottawa Public Health. I'm starting to think the way that Councillor Harder is, that we can accommodate I hate to use that term, but if we were to start a little bit earlier, reduce the slide presentations, and got right down to the discussions, we can get everything within the same meeting. That's just a personal view, and I'll wait to see if there's any other discussions around the table. Mr. Chair, maybe you wanted to give some feedback on that as well.
And hear from the public first before we take any motion. And so you do have a motion?
I do have a motion. Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
That working groups be disbanded and all work come before OPS regular board meetings. And just to speak to the question of confidentiality, as it was mentioned, when we have our board meeting, we have confidential issues, which in-camera issues, which we move for. The same thing, any of those will just go into that same segment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to call Mr. Kevin O'Donnell to make a presentation. Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell, you have 5 minutes to address the board on this subject.
Great. Thank you, Chair. I just had a few quick comments, but from some of the discussion, I have brand new ones, which will be fun. I was just curious. I read the report, and it mentioned posting the subcommittee meetings on the website, and I just was curious if I could get a clarification. Does that mean the e-agenda site as it handles the board meeting, or is it just a one-page somewhere on the ottawapolice.ca?
It will be the same as the board website.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that because that'll just fold into some of the projects I do. Another question I had is just a clarification, perhaps instructions for the committee chairs. On page 5 in the background, closer to the end, it excerpts the Police Services Act, and paragraph 4 makes it very clear. Well, paragraph 3 says meetings shall be open, no exceptions, and then paragraph 4 provides the criteria for where it may become a closed meeting. And the word may in there is very critical. It's at the discretion of the chair in their judgment. Later on in the same report, page 9, the same content is referenced, but the paragraph lead-in on paragraph 4 is omitted, and you just see the criteria where the Police Services Act allows a closed meeting to occur. And I think that's just if a committee chair later is referencing this policy, it might miss out that it's may close the meeting. So just if the instructions after this point to the committee chairs could always clarify that there is no provincial law that says meetings must be closed at any time, because there's always that public interest to balance, and I'd hate to have a committee chair just, a busy day, lots of stuff to do, and just make that mistake of closing a meeting when perhaps not realizing they could have kept it open had they wanted to. So it's just a clarification. Also, I'm pretty sure from the rules of procedure that we'll always know about a closed meeting. I think closed meetings are fine. There's always a good reason for it. I trust the chair's discretion. I would like to know if that transition into and out of closed would always be part of the records, just so the public can know that an item was considered, just as it does in the city today. And then finally, I think this is a great idea. The bulk of my comments here come from having read the report. And at this point, in the city equivalent, at this point I would be addressing full council, which doesn't happen at city council. At that point it's too late for public input. The board is different. The board accepts public delegations at this time. And I just find it kind of ironic or funny that all of my comments here today would have been directly applicable at the next time the procedures subcommittee considers a review of this policy. I would actually attend the policy subcommittee to offer my comments on the draft report, at which point there's more time for that exhaustive discussion. I'm sorry, Member Smallwood mentioned, and the chair, that that's when I could have attended for 20 minutes and had this back and forth. It's interesting, not in a 5-minute constraint, and had the opportunity to do that. And then by the time it rises to this board, it's all been cleaned up and it's great, and off it goes. Or you still accept public feedback, because by then the media have had an opportunity to cover the subcommittee. More information is made public. Maybe the public is really engaged, and they still have the opportunity to come here. And I think there's just only good things come from that. And then I think if I have more time, I wasn't keeping track. 30 seconds.
I think you have.
Okay, it'll be quick. I was just curious about the board recently amended its rules of procedures to allow a delegation such as myself to present to the chair through the executive director an agenda for consideration that's not otherwise on an agenda, which I find a very good practice. Gives the board an opportunity to address an issue that isn't otherwise rising to the board. And I was just curious if that policy that's new to the board, I don't know if it's ever been utilized yet, would carry down to the subcommittees. So, if, for instance, if I just had an issue on this item, I could email the executive director and through them the chair to say, well, would you like to consider this maybe for next time at the subcommittee level? And maybe that's just something for the board to consider, just an idea. Yeah.
It is the same procedure, Mr. O'Donnell, than the board is procedure. So the committee or the working group is the same procedure, because this is actually our board procedures to follow through. Any question to the presenter? To Mr. O'Donnell? Okay. Mr. O'Donnell, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Any question to...
Yeah, so a working group, I don't think, this is not for you, Mr. O'Donnell. This is more for Mr. White. From being on many, many boards in my elected time and other things, there's a very big difference between a committee meeting and a working group. And so if these are now going to be called what was formerly a working group that is now formally going to be a formal committee, then I can see that the same rules would apply and somebody could come and speak about something entirely not on the agenda at a working group. I think that... Do you have any legal opinion on that? Or am I catching you off guard? Because I'm catching me off guard, actually. So.
Of course, it could be both. I think, again, because the way that the board conducts meetings is somewhat different than the way council and its committees conduct meetings. The committees of council have a separate mandate. Some of them have decision-making authorities.
But Mr. White, they're not working groups. So we have committees of council where Mr. O'Donnell, anybody in the room, any of us can go and speak. Build Heritage, for example. We can go and speak, okay? But then we have sponsors groups, okay, which are working groups. And the sponsors groups, for example, on building better, smarter suburbs, building better, revitalized neighborhoods, the transportation master plan, the official plan, development charge, all those sponsor groups where we have a mix of people. We might have somebody from the Federation of Community Associations, we may have 3 or 4 counselors, and 3 people from the industry, different parts of the industry. That's a working group. That's not advertised. That is a working group, and staff use that for technical purposes, for building purposes, to understand where they need to go. That's always been my opinion of the work that was done, with the exception of a couple that would never be public anyways, like the Complaints Committee or Human Resources, right, that never would anyways. So are we going to call these, now they're not working groups, and the language has got to be straight, because I bet you in the Police Services Act there isn't a definition for a working group. Maybe I'm wrong. I could very well be wrong.
No, you are correct in that regard. Given that the working groups committees are undertaking of individual assignments, for want of a better term, that are assigned to them by the board, and of course the committees, working groups, the board itself is free to establish its own procedures. From a procedural standpoint, I would see those public delegations with respect to items not on the agenda coming to the board, which would then be assigned down if the board essentially sees that as something it wants to add to its agenda for the meeting, or more generally, that would then assign that if it wants consideration at a working group or a committee.
So that's for fact and clarification, as opposed to what we just heard and Mr. O'Donnell told that, yes, he can show up at a working group and talk about anything of his choosing. So she's not in charge of the working groups. Anyway, thank you for the information.
We do have a motion from Member Harder that the working group be dismantled and all work come before OPS, the Ottawa Police Service Board, regular board meetings. So I would ask for the ayes and nays on this one. Okay, you ask. We're going to ask the ayes and nays. Do you have the list? Okay, Member Nicholson. On Councillor Harder's motion first.
Nay.
No? Okay. Member Smallwood.
Nay.
Member Harder.
Yes.
Member Turney.
Yes.
Member Velikat.
Nay.
And myself, no. So the motion failed. On the item itself, item number 2, the date, time, location of the committee meeting, the item carry. Carry, thank you. And now, and one dissent, member Harder dissent. Okay. And now we'll go to item number 1, the chief's verbal report, and I believe the acting chief, Jules Skinner, will deliver the message on behalf of the chief. Acting chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I have a short verbal report for you this evening. I'm going to begin with some excellent and quick-thinking police work by 2 of our officers in mid-June of this year. District Investigator Evan Hung and Central Patrol Constable Kim Desjardins responded to a call in an Overbrook apartment where they encountered a man thought to be armed. After entering the residence, the officers encountered the man in a bedroom. He had his back turned to them, his gun was concealed, and he was trying to flee. It was a dangerous situation, and both officers made the split-second decision to tackle him, causing the gun to fall to the floor. He was found with 180 grams of cocaine and a loaded 9mm handgun. Our officers have a tough job to do, and this is an excellent example of how dangerous and volatile situations can occur every day. In this case, their training and experience paid off. The Ottawa Police Service has a great deal of experience maintaining security and order at large public events. But even for our service, this week will be extraordinarily busy as we support the North American Leaders Summit and Canada Day. As was announced Friday, there will be some major traffic disruptions related to NALS. We have been working with our partners, businesses, and the city to minimize the impact on residents and visitors. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our members who've been working alongside our partners in preparation for 2 major back-to-back events this week. Finally, I wanted to provide a short update on consultations related to the service initiative. We were very pleased to hear from over 800 residents through our online questionnaire and about 200 stakeholders through the consultation sessions, meetings, and presentations. Here are a few of the key themes we heard. There is a need to ensure that we improve information sharing with the community, that we continue to build relationships with the community, and that we maintain and improve proactive policing and engagement activities in any new model. These were all excellent points, and we are ensuring the model reflects those comments. We're now compiling and analyzing the feedback, and we will be providing a full summary of the results in our quarterly update to you in July. Subject to any questions, that's the report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Chief Skinner. Any question? We'll start with Member Nicholson because he has to leave. Oh, you're leaving. Okay. So it's okay. Your excuse, sir. Member Smallwood.
I just wondered if I could ask a question about that report we received earlier on about the crime statistics.
You're talking about the annual report, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wondered, Deputy Chief, I noticed in the crime report that violent crime was down, but the crime severity had gone up. And I wondered if you had any comments as to why that might be.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, you're absolutely correct that the violent crime did drop by 1%. The overall severity of violent crime increased by 7%, which was driven by increases in attempt murders, robberies, assaults, sexual violations, and abduction offenses. Additionally, the increase in non-violent crimes that carry more serious sentences, such as break and enters, actually added to that outcome.
Have any idea why that was? What has caused that reversal in the trend? I mean, it's interesting. The crime's dropping, yet the severity of it is increasing. Is there something that's driving that?
There are many drivers of violent crime, and the crime severity index is reflective of the changing in our society, that people have become more violent, and the people that are actually captured by the police tend to be people who are involved in crime more often, which results in longer sentences, and that's what the crime severity index is built upon.
You have any more question, Member Smallwood? Or?
I guess I'm still at a loss as to why we've seen that change in 1 year. I just, like, I'm not sure. Is it like are more gangs coming into town? Is it increased gang activity? I'm just wondering what could be, why we're seeing that change, and is this something that's a trend, or is it maybe a blip that happened in the last year, and we're not going to see it again?
Well, we're not able to say that yet from a statistical point of view. We would need to have 3 years worth of statistics to be able to say that it was a trend that was happening. But from a crime severity perspective, people spend their whole careers trying to determine, why crime goes up and down, and subject to a master's presentation on why crime increases, I'm not sure that I could adequately answer that question.
Is there a possibility of seeing more guns used in crime now? Is that maybe one of the reasons why we're seeing the severity increase?
Well, we've certainly seen an increase in attempt murders, robberies, and assaults. So we have seen more violence, and we have seen more guns, although in 2015 it has dropped slightly.
Thank you, Member Small. Member Veliquette.
Can you tell us if it's concentrated in certain parts of the city, or is this overall?
The annual report actually breaks it down ward by ward, and you can see that some wards have a slightly increase. But I think if you actually look at the annual report, you will see that it's a general increase throughout the city.
And would that be comparable to other cities in Ontario? I mean, is there the same sort of type of statistics across Canada or around the area, in the region?
Well, I think it's very difficult to compare one city to another. There are so many drivers for crime. Social determinants of health are significant factors that play into crime, and there are some cities that are doing much better than others, and the same way they're doing better from a social perspective, they're doing better from a crime perspective.
Thank you, Acting Chief. Member Harder.
Yeah, Acting Chief, is it not true that one single incident can skew the statistics entirely? For example, the year that Jennifer Teague was murdered in Barrhaven, it increased it by 1,200 and some %. My stats in Barrhaven are down with the exception to calls, and that's because I have the greatest growth area in the entire city. So you have to be very careful when you interpret this. I had the Gill murder 2 years ago. There's a spike there. It's an insignificant spike. You'd go, oh my God, what's happening in Barrhaven? Bring out the tanks. But it's one incident, and it's very rare. Barrhaven really, and in many suburban areas, graffiti and vandalism are your crimes. And, of course, the traffic ones, speeding all the time and that sort of thing. So you just have to be very careful how you interpret this, because I think what we're seeing in the report is that we live in a very safe city. Our police are doing a great job. We have a significant growth. We're the 4th largest city in Canada, and our stats are excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Harder. Thank you very much, Acting Chief. And on the Chief's verbal report, received. Thank you very much, and we do have a presentation. I'll turn it to the Acting Chief to introduce her folks to item number 3, implementation of Ontario Regulation 58/16, collection of identifying information. Acting Chief.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You'll see before you, and you've met this pair before. They've presented to you a number of times. We have Inspector Mark Patterson and Ms. Laurie Fenton, who are going to provide you information on the Ontario regulation and the updates as far as the board is concerned. Inspector Patterson, thank you both for your work on this.
Thank you, Acting Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. In addition to the update report before you today, I'm here to provide you with an implementation update on the Regulation 58/16, which is the collection of identifying information for regulated interactions, formerly referred to as street checks. Our slide deck was 40, but I've lowered it now to 10, Mr. Tierney. Member Tierney, if you're okay with that? No, it won't be. In terms of background, recall that in June 2015, there was a provincial announcement and we had a province-wide consultation for street check standardization. From July to September 2015, with the implementation of OPS street check engagement and consultation plan, and from this consultation plan we submitted this to the province. In October 2015, we are aware that the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services released a draft regulation for consultation under the Police Services Act, and that was entitled Collection of Identifying Information in Certain Circumstances, Prohibition and Duties. That draft regulation was put on for a 45-day consultation period, again for key stakeholders and citizens to provide their input. On March 22nd, 2016, Minister McAfee announced final regulations, collection of identifying information in certain circumstances, again the prohibitions and duties. Releases in Ontario Regulation 5816, it includes new rules for voluntary public police interactions where identifying information is collected by officers. It also includes prohibitions, including arbitrary collection of identifying information, as well as training, reporting, and policy requirements. There is also an additional regulation to amend the police conduct section of the Police Services Act. The regulation applies where police are attempting to collect identifying information from an individual during face-to-face encounters, while investigating general criminal activity in the community, inquiring into suspicious activities to detect offenses, gathering information for intelligence purposes. The regulations do not apply when an officer is conducting an investigation into an offense that is reasonably suspected or has been or will be committed, or in other circumstances that are specifically outlined in the regulation. For example, if the person is legally required to provide information, for example, during a traffic stop under the Highway Traffic Act, or if the person is under arrest or being detained, or when the officer is executing a warrant. Those are two other examples. The timing and implementation. The regulation has very aggressive timelines, taking into effect 2 phases, in part on July 1st, and then again in full by January 1st, 2017. The Ottawa Police is very well positioned for the first deadline, July 1st, 2016, which includes application and interpretation of this regulation, prohibition of quotas as a performance measurement tool. So already in compliance with that, as quotas are not part of OPS practices or policies for performance reviews, promotional processes, or transfers. The Police Services Board administers to develop policies relating to the application of the regulation, and direction to the Chiefs of Police to develop procedures consistent with the Board policy and regulation. Timing and implementation for January 1st, 2017. All the remaining sections, including training and the amended Code of Conduct, come into effect January 1st, 2017, as follows. Officers must inform the person of their right not to provide identifying information. Officers must provide a reason for requesting identifying information, and the reason cannot be arbitrary, that the person declined to answer a question or attempted to end the interaction, or based on the race, or solely because the individual is in a high crime location. Officers in January 2017 and moving forward must offer a document that includes the officer's name and identification number, information on how to contact the OIPRD, and if there are concerns about the interaction, and how to access information. Officer must also keep detailed records about every interaction. And failure to comply with these regulations could be a Code of Conduct violation for police officers. Training component of the regulations. There's a substantial training requirement prior to January 1st, 2017. The province has appointed a roundtable of experts with knowledge of human rights, community needs, issues affecting youth, privacy laws, curriculum development, policing, and other relevant fields to provide input to the development of new training for police. The Ontario Police College is leading the design and development of province-wide training. It's going to be a train-the-trainer model will be provided to police services that includes online modules, theory, and practical exercises. Police officers are to receive 8 hours of initial training by January 2017, and then every 3 years. This training will also be introduced to recruits as part of their training. The training topics will include racism and discrimination, bias awareness, public police interactions, again, avoiding psychological detention, a right of a person not to provide information to an officer, and respect for his right, as well as a right for a person to continue an interaction with an officer. Management of identifying information. The management of identifying information is also a substantial piece of work. Identifying information is submitted within 30 days for review by a chief designate who will review the police officer's reason for collecting the information, and if the police officer indicated that there was compliance with other aspects of the regulation. As well, at least once a year, the chief of police or designate has to conduct a detailed review into the database to verify compliance with the regulation of law. Access to identifying information is going to be restricted as it is found to be, if it's found to be collected inappropriately. Access to restricted information granted by the chief on a case-by-case basis for specific purposes. Examples are ongoing police investigation, legal proceedings, complying with a legal requirement, etc. Access to this identifying information is also going to be restricted for 5 years after it's entered into a police database. Identifying information which is collected contrary to the regulation shall not be retained longer than is reasonably necessary to ensure the information is available in circumstances which access may be permitted for several reasons. Some of these include for the purpose of an ongoing police investigation, in connection with legal proceedings or anticipated legal proceedings, as well as for the purpose of evaluating a police officer's performance. What are the reporting requirements? The chiefs of police will be required to provide annual reporting that includes the number of times identifying information was collected, demographic information about individuals from whom information was requested, example, race, age, gender, etc. The number of times it was determined upon review of the officer's reasons that the officer did not comply with the regulation. What are the financial impacts? You may or may not be aware, I'm working closely with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police on a special working group which was created. The costs are going to be tracked and reported in the first annual report. There are going to be significant impacts expected on training, data, records management, and reporting monitoring requirements. The next steps. While the regulations present significant unplanned impacts on the organization, particularly on training, data management processes and storage, auditing and reporting, we will continue working with the police members as well as the provincial partners to ensure compliance with the new regulations by January 1st, 2017. These are the upcoming key implementation activities. In closing, regulated interactions remain an important tool for solving and preventing crime in our community. We are committed to community engagement and community safety while balancing the right of individuals. As we move forward with the implementation, we will continue to provide updates and engagement opportunities along the way. The province is also working on the public education materials. Thank you for your time today. I'm available for any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Inspector Price. We do have a question from Member Harder, Councillor Harder.
Thank you, and thanks for your presentation. It was really good. My question is, so I think if I was thinking about what the general public in the City of Ottawa thinks and what their concerns are, they certainly would be concerned about any kind of bias on a cultural or a race level. However, I think that they'd be equally as concerned if we were going out of our way when we knew that the victims and the criminals, were of a certain culture, age, description, gender, et cetera, and in order to be fair, we were going out and actually targeting a whole bunch of people who clearly don't fit the demographic. I'll give you an example. You go through airport security, and they say that they have a fair system that doesn't target the somebody who is a white woman who's 65 and whatever with red hair. They will say, that's why some children are scanned, that's why some older people are scanned, and that's very, very informal. No, it's actually very restricted to a fairness. I think that the public as I said, in the city, have expectations that I think that you meet 99.9% of the time, all the time. But when you're in a situation where you just know information, you've got to reassure the public through us that that's the information you're going to go with. I mean, this is all nice and some bureaucrat and elected person in Ontario came up with this, but really, we care about the people in this city. So how would you respond to that? Has this gone too far for that to happen, that we know what we're looking for, we have, in a certain situation? For example, on the weekend, you had the stabbing and the knife attack. Now, that's a little bit different because there were only 2 people involved, and so they both were hurt, so you got them both. But if there had been like 4 people involved, okay, how would you have gone after that? Who would you have chased down in the streets or stopped in the streets and that sort of thing?
So in answer to your question, the regulations are strict, but everything is manageable. And I think it all comes back to the training component. Using your example, Member Harder, you have to remember is these regulations only apply when for arbitrary and random stops, which the Ottawa Police Service was not engaged in. We've been echoing that, myself and Roy Fenton, when we've done our committee consultations. If officers are engaged in investigating an offense and it's been committed, like the example of your stabbing scenario you spoke about, then officers are able to go out and ask for identifying information from those people because they're in the act of identifying the perpetrators, whether suspects or victims that are involved in that. So there wouldn't be a question there. What this regulation is stopping officers from doing is going out and driving and stopping somebody randomly or arbitrarily, whether it was based on their race or other means, to get their collect their identifying information. Remember, it's a face-to-face encounter, which we weren't a part of. So, in answer to your question, it's going to take an education to our officers and a training component that the community is faced with as well. Well, we want to reassure you as a police service, and I'm not speaking for the acting chief, but reassure you that our officers are continuing doing their job. Is it going to be there's going to be a training component, as we spoke to here, where the officers are going to be involved in understanding, and again, I spoke with some of the areas are going to be, it will be addressed. But officers will do their due diligence. It's all about articulation as well. And again, if you're investigating an offense or something you believe to be committed, then the officer has the ability to go and ask who that person, what their information is, and either put into a general occurrence report or into what we're going to be calling a regulated interaction.
And can you do that repeatedly? For example, say we're talking about Barrhaven. From my perspective, we've got a lot of people. I mean, my crime is different than the market, for sure. Let's face it. But texting and driving, okay, or whatever, speeding all the time. And there's consistently, from a high school, certain person leaves this building and that, they've got they're driving a white Impala, whatever. So if there are 10 Impalas, there's nothing to say that you can stop all of those if you don't know which is the Impala, correct? If there's repeated. Now, what if you do it 4 days in a row? That's still going to be okay in your search for, I mean, you wouldn't probably go to that kind of excess. I wish you would, but I'm pretty sure you wouldn't. But that's just as an example.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, in relation to that question, you're going in the information that's provided by the public. So I know with some services looking at street checks right now and have been in the past where it's been community assisted or community members called in and they've been tracking that. For that particular scenario, example you're giving, the community is telling us there's a particular vehicle speeding and they're giving us a description. Whether if the person is a white male, 50, 40, 47, myself, dark hair and balding, and I'm driving a white Corolla, then the police officer will obviously be stopping me and, enforcing the Highway Traffic Act if necessary. Again, this regulation goes back to the fact where people are stopping, officers are stopping random or arbitrarily for no reason. If you have an offense that's being investigated and you have the ability to ask the person for identification and they have to give that information, then the officer is obviously has the ability to do that under the Police Services Act. I'm not sure if that answers your question. So.
It does. And just one thing further, we had the senior gentleman who was of a particular culture, who was obviously mental health issue, as we know now, but he was kissing women at bus stops in Barrhaven, okay? Now, you didn't know who he was, but you did have really good descriptions. with that information, and that's information coming from the public, what you're telling me is that that profile is what you would be stopping people and looking for.
Yeah, and quite honestly, officers involved in criminal profiling all the time. If we have information that suggests that this suspect matches that description, and we have the ability to go and investigate or stop a person who meets that description. Again, this comes back to the fact, and if you look at the regulations, when it comes to racially marginalized persons, there's a decision tree, and we're asking actually the OPC to provide us with a decision tree for officers to have, whether it's a pocket size, whatever, to come to make sure that they're following the regulations. So you're not stopping somebody randomly, arbitrarily, whatever their race, their sex is. You have to have a reason for that stop, for that face-to-face interaction, and the regulations cover that. And again, everything is manageable. There's going to be a training component, and it's going to be a learning experience for the officers. But obviously, like I said, it'll be manageable.
So just finally, Mr. Chair, so that's good reassurance, I think. That's really good information, and I appreciate it. You know, we find that the provincial government, and please don't think I'm running for any other level of government and why I keep bringing this up, but they are, for example, right now they have inspectors that are going into long-term care facilities every single day. They are causing a problem with the care of the people in those facilities. I would not want us ever to be in a position where, because somebody needs to add some rules to make them feel better, that we are doing something that isn't in the best interest of the people in this city. What you've told me, I have assurances that that's not the case, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Inspector Person. Member Velikat.
So this is not going to stop you from following your spidey sense. If you're driving down and you see somebody that you feel that there's something suspicious or you need to talk to, you're still going to have an opportunity to approach that person, but the way you approach them might be different. Is that what we're saying?
You have to remember, though, is that there's guidelines there for the officers to do that. And I keep using the term random and arbitrary because the officer, and the key word here is articulation. The officer has to remember, if they're stopping a person, they have to have a reason for that. It's not just suspicious activity, right? Because you have to have more grounds for that. And it used to be moving forward with these new regulated interactions, an officer could articulate and say it's a high crime area. That's pretty hard to define, right? A high crime area to begin with, but an officer can't just say, I'm stopping that person because this area is known for drug trafficking. You can't do that as per the regulations. You have to have other information to be able to back that, to be able to, for you to, as an officer, to investigate and have that face-to-face interaction.
So is that where the training is going to come in?
Yes, yeah. And more so, Member Valica, more so in relation to, because with the new regulations, an officer has to provide their name and the reason why they're stopping them, and then they also have to understand that a person doesn't have to get that information. So the training will also focus on what happens when that person walks away and the officer's interactions with that person.
Thank you, Member Turney.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I agree with Councillor Harder. Great presentation. It got right to the points. Love seeing these kind of presentations. I did want to just kind of highlight, first of all, I think our city has shown a lot of leadership when it comes to this file, and it's great that the province wants to come in, I'm going to consider it late in the game, and jump in. Usually they, meddle with everything with arbitration and everything else, but I'm hoping, in this case, that they're actually looking at us being the leaders. Because I'll tell you, I brought a presentation to FCM, which I'm the Ontario Caucus Chair, and there was a lot of people around that table from Ontario. Shelley Carroll, Police Board member in Toronto, Pam McConnell, the right hand to the Mayor in Toronto, Councillor McConnell. There was a whole bunch of them that were quite surprised about the level of work we've done in this city, and I think that's something that has to be recognized. We got the president of the Ontario Police Association sitting right here. We got the chief of chiefs apparently now sitting around the table. So I think we have a lot of leadership, and we can go a long way with this. I just want to ensure that that's being recognized. Do you see the province coming to us looking for what we're doing as part of what they're building as a program?
Yeah, and I can echo your comments, sir. And this starts from the top, from the executive down. Leadership is strong there, and down to the senior officers, down to the rank and file. And we have been recognized. I know, you're aware, myself and Inspector Flanagan and Lloyd Fenton and others from the Community Development section went to a racial profiling dialogue in Toronto, and they spoke highly about what we're doing in Ottawa and the consultation piece that we're doing and the dialogue that we're having with racially marginalized communities and those representing them. And I think that we do get accolades throughout the province, and the Ontario Human Rights Commission has also provided those accolades. So it has been recognized, and I think we're actually leading the way.
Thank you for the great work on this.
Thank you very much, Member Turney. And Inspector, I'm not sure the question you're going to be able to answer, or maybe the Director General. When we talk about the financial implication for this, as you mentioned, every officer has to be trained by 8 hours by January 2017. Is that correct? And the new recruit will be trained in Aylmer before they come to us.
Yeah, so as per the regulations, and we talked about this part of the working group, Mr. Chair, and the issue is going to be is the training for, there's going to be a train-the-trainer component. Organized services across Ontario are going to obviously do the training for those officers who are going to engage in street checks, i.e. frontline officers, NHOs, DART officers, those ones that are going to be obviously doing street checks. So that's going to be paramount for how those officers train first. Whether they get all the officers across the service trained by January 1st, that might be a high bar to set, but certainly those people that are going to be doing the street checks will have to be trained by that time. So, and that's as per the regulation, you get that training, and then you have to be trained over 3 years. And we don't know the cost associated with that, because they don't even have the training syllabus down. I'll leave it to Director General if she's got any comments in relation to that.
Director General?
Mr. Chair, I think it's an example of an unexpected cost for us because when we were planning the budget, we didn't have, the regulation hadn't been released, and we weren't certain about the extent of the obligations that we'd have to comply with in 2016. So we'll be having a look at how we would build in that training to our training calendar and what the kind of investment we'll have to make to train. We have roughly 1,400 officers who would need that training, and we'll prioritize those who need it first. But along with training, there's a significant data and information management obligation as well. And those are things that I think what we'll do is summarize that for you when we do the next update to give you a feel for the scope of the cost in 2016 and then as an ongoing obligation as well. We'll do our best to balance the budget. We always try and do that, but this is the year of unexpected costs. Need I say President Obama?
Okay. Because we noticed that the training for Section 58/16, as they call it now, and then you have the training for the tasers on the annual, and then you have the annual training as well. And all the... Okay. Thank you very much, folks. And so the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Is the item received? So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Inspector Parris and Laurie, for your presentation. Folks, that will conclude our meeting in open. So this portion of the public meeting has ended. The board will be staying in this room to consider its in-camera agenda. We will be reconvened in public following the in-camera portion of the meeting to report on the board's review of a complaint under Section 69 of the Police Service Act referred to by the Office of the Independent Police Review Director, ORPD. Is that okay? Can we ask you folks to leave this room as we're staying in it? Deputy, you'll tell us who's staying and who's not?